Hello everyone, it's Sir J once again. This is another day, another learning video. Today's learning will focus on the role of science and technology in Philippine nation building. Second is to evaluate government policies in terms of science and technology pertaining to its contribution in nation building. And lastly, we're going to identify actual science and technology policies of the government and appraise its impact in the development of Filipino nation. This is STS Lesson 2, Science, Technology, and Nation Building. If in the previous video we have discussed the development of science and technology in a worldwide perspective, this time we will focus on Philippine setting. So we're going to travel back in time and trace the history of science and technology in the Philippines, how it started from pre-colonial era, Spanish colonization, American colonization, and up to the present time. Contrary to many belief that Filipinos are uncivilized before the coming of the Spaniards, the early inhabitants of the archipelago had their own culture and tradition. Our country is already composed of groups or tribes that govern specific areas with unique set of rules or justice system, which may not be as complicated as our justice system right now, but the fact that they have their own rules in the community made them civilized. Regions before are governed by Iraha and local communities are governed by Datu. Also, our ancestors had their own belief system, which is the Anito, or the belief in the spirits in nature. They worship or praise objects in nature such as rocks, trees, mountains, and many more, or anything with unusual formation. Also, science and technology already existed during that time. One great example is the Banawe rice terraces, which is a product of our ancestors to maximize irrigation and food production during their time. How thus culture and traditions are shown in the pre-colonial times? Well, it is said that it is embedded in their way of life, meaning they are unaware that what they are doing is already forming culture. One great example is on health. Our ancestors already know the medicinal and therapeutic properties of plants to cure various illnesses and diseases. The babaylan, which is shown in this image, is a female healer and also an advisor to the tribe leader. She is asked about the faith, also about the chances of the leaders in winning mga tribes wars and battles. In modern times, they are already called as the albularyo or faith healers. Okay. Another example is the raising of poultry and livestock by our ancestors. They are already crossbreeding different breeds of poultry and livestock to produce better products. They already develop a system in transportation, both inland and in maritime, to exchange products with other tribes. In fact, another misconception is said that Magellan discovered us, where in fact, prior to the coming of the Spaniards, our ancestors are already trading products with other nations such as Japan, China, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Here are the sciences during the pre-colonial time. Number one is the planting of crops that provide them food. As I mentioned a while ago, Banawe rice terraces is a great example because the ancestors have maximized planting in mountainsides and also despite the cold temperature. Next is taking care of animals for reproduction and exchange of products during trades. Also food production, they have plant fruits, vegetables, and spices which the Philippine is known during this time, and interpret the movements of heavenly bodies to predict seasons and climates, which are done again by the babaylan, and also use medicinal plants to cure illnesses and diseases of the community. In terms of technology, in building houses, we already have or maximize the use of products in the environment such as bamboo, woods, anahaw to build houses and construct halls and communities. For irrigations, we have made our own system of irrigation. Best example again is the Banawi rice terraces. We also developed tools from rocks and metals which were traded from other nations. And also we had our own musical instruments up here that only shows that early Filipinos are already forming technologies. Aside from that, we also have traces in Metal Age influence, such as with the use of gold and silver jewelry, which serves as status symbol to our tribe leaders during that time, their wives. Also, we have traded with other countries, as we mentioned a while ago, and also indigenous or folk sciences, such as ito na nga yung pag-construct ng mga transportation system, yung mga balsa, pag-construct ng irrigation, like sa mga terraces, pag-conserve ng environment, plants and animals in food production for agriculture. That is what we meant by indigenous or folk sciences. After the pre-colonial era, here comes the Spaniards. They have brought their own culture and practices and changed entirely our own belief system. They made use of Catholicism to control Filipinos. Aside from religion, science and technology during their times modernized almost everything, from building roads, walls, bridges, churches, and other large infrastructures, which can still be evident until this day, such as the Intramuros in Manila and other bridges in Tayabas, Quezon. Spaniards also established schools for the boys and girls, built colleges and universities. One example is the University of Santo Tomas, which is one of the oldest schools in the country. They also introduced the concept of subjects and disciplines. Learning of science focuses on understanding concepts related to the human body, plants, animals, and bodies. Health and medicine were also given attention. However, health and education during this time are only exclusive for the people belonging to the upper class. Education in health is not for all, and ordinary people, Filipinos especially, are deprived of this aspect. Technology focuses on using and developing hand tools. This is also considered as the formal start of science and technology being taught in school along with religion and the 3 R's, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic. So life during the Spanish rule became modernized. The Filipinos replicated technology brought by the Spaniards using indigenous materials such as those that can be found in local communities such as mga woods, stones, or other metals which are mined from different local communities. Also, medicine and advanced science were introduced in formal colleges and universities. So, from the concept lang ng therapeutic and medicinal property of plants comes now the formal education when it comes to medicine. Although many advancements happened, the Spaniards still focus on trade, and the best example is the Manila galleon trade, where Manila is served as one of the great ports of exchange in China and Europe. This is where a lot of products are exchanged, such as silk, porcelain, spices, gold, and jewelries, exotic products such as perfume, precious stones, and cotton fabrics. However, this trade is monopolized by the government. So the galleon trade had a negative effect on economic development in the Philippines since virtually all Spanish capital was devoted to speculations on Chinese goods. So mas gusto nila yung mga produkto ng China. Kaya hindi ganun ka naging kumbaga favorable for the Philippines yung exchange na ito. So the galleon trade was supplied by merchants largely from port areas of Fujian who traveled to Manila to sell the Spaniards spices, porcelain, ivory, processed silk cloth, and other valuable commodities, as I mentioned a while ago. From 1565 to 1815, the galleon trade contributed to the change of culture, language, environment for both Philippines and Mexico. Since we are trading with other nations, we are also adapting to their culture and traditions which we learned, which contributed also to the vast diversity of our culture right now. So the galleon trade was a government monopoly. Only 2 galleons were used, or the ship. One sailed from Acapulco to Manila with some 500,000 pesos worth of goods, spending 120 days at sea, while the other sailed from Manila to Acapulco with some 250,000 pesos worth of goods, spending 90 days at sea. So that's how trade works. Only 2 ships are exchanging shipment from Acapulco to Manila and vice versa. Because of the galleon trade, the country became one of the centers of global trade in Southeast Asia. Like I mentioned a while ago, Manila became one of the greatest ports of exchange of products from Manila to Europe, Mexico, China, and other regions. So one of the most developed places in the region was in the Philippines. Okay. However, because of the superstitious beliefs in Catholic doctrines and practices, it halted the growth of science in the country. As we all know, like in other countries, like as we've studied from the previous discussion, if something contradicts to the belief in Catholicism, it is not given priority or neglected. Now, because of that, the development of science and technology in the Philippines did not continue that much. After the Spaniards, here comes the American period. If the Spaniards already modernized the country in terms of science and technology, well, the Americans brought it to the next level of improvement. Almost all aspects were enhanced, such as agriculture, food production, medicine, and even pharmacy. Even in the mode of transportation were improved. Public education were also given priority by the Americans. In fact, a lot of universities were built, such as research school, like the University of the Philippines, Philippine Normal University, and the Manila Business School, now a Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Aside from that, Americans also improved the engineering works and health of the people. In fact, more hospitals were built for public access, such as the Philippine General Hospital, or PGH. Mining industry were also explored and maximized by the government. However, it exploited the country's natural resources. During this time, Filipinos were said to be Americanized because almost all aspects were changed from being conservative into a more liberal Filipinos. Okay. Also, the subjects and disciplines were reorganized into the learning of sciences. And in basic education, science education focuses on nature studies and science and sanitation, including hygiene. In terms of health and sanitation, Filipinos learned the value of cleanliness and proper hygiene and health practices. Hospitals, clinics, and health centers were established, including public hospitals for lepers or the patients which has leprosy, a skin condition na may mga wounds sa balat, may mga bumps, which eventually spread sa mga muscles, yan kaya nanghihina at yung iba mga nalulumpo because of this condition. No, pinandidirihan siya before, but during the time of the Americans, they established a hospital which treats person with leprosy. So, nabigyan sila ng immediate medical attention. Now, aside from education, health, and sanitation, Americans also invested in other infrastructure such as building of roads, streets, and bridges, which are evidently better compared to the ones which was constructed by the Spaniards. Also, the new infrastructures helped make the movement of products and services more efficient. Also, boulevards, zone districts, centers of leisure were also established, such as mga parks. During the American period is also the World War II, where no significant improvement in science and technology were recorded, since mostly were devastation, death, and catastrophe. During this time, the country had a difficult time to rebuild itself from the ruins of war. Since many of the infrastructures and properties were destroyed, it was a hard time for the Philippines to rise up once again. So the human spirit to survive and to rebuild the country may be strong, but the capacity of the country to bring back what was destroyed was limited. We have limited resources, manpower, and also leadership during this time. After the war comes the New Republic, where the United States of America helped the country rebuild and gain its independence. So in the New Republic, they focus on using the limited resources in improving science and technology capabilities, and also use of overseas development allocation to improve scientific productivity and technological capability. Also, they improved human resource development. So the country did not build on its own. The Philippines were greatly helped by the Americans through the Tidings-McDuffie Law, where it set a 10-year transition program for the Philippines to assure that it is ready for its independence. Given all these instances that happened in the past, we can now trace the influences in the development of science and technology in the Philippines. So we can say that we have two factors here. No? We have the internal influences and the external influences. Under internal influences, we have survivability. Our culture and economic activities greatly help in the development of science and technology in the Philippines, such as what happened in the pre-colonial era. While external influences happen to be the foreign colonizers, trades from foreign countries during the galleon trade, and even prior to the galleon trade, and the international economic demands of our country and others as well. Now that we have traced the development of science and technology from the pre-colonial era up to the New Republic, how does school shape science and technology in our country? Or how is science and technology being injected or incorporated in various subjects in school? This time, we will be discussing government policies in terms of science and technology. And to give you an example, we have the Republic Act number 2067, also known as the Science Act of 1958. This is an act to integrate, coordinate, and intensify scientific and technological research and development to foster invention. And here are some other government policies in terms of science and technology. First is they introduced and implemented programs, projects, and policies to boost science and technology, which the goal is to prepare the country and its people to meet the demands of a technologically driven world and capacitate the people to live in a world driven by sciences. And one of the presidents who advanced science and technology during this time was former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., where he spearheaded the foundation of the Philippine Heart Center, National Kidney and Transplant Institute, and the Lung Center of the Philippines. He also established the PAGASA, or the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Atmospherical Administration, under the Department of Defense to prepare the country for strong typhoons. And also, he spearheaded also the improvement of the Department of Science and Technology. Disclaimer, although he has a lot of contributions when it comes to science and technology, it cannot remove the fact that they abused their powers during martial law. And these were the contributions of the father, not the child. Fast forward to modern times. So in response to the ASEAN 2015 agenda, the government, particularly the DOST, has sought the expertise of the NRCP, or the National Research Council of the Philippines, to consult various sectors in the society to study how the Philippines can prepare itself in meeting the ASEAN 2015 goals. Now, this was already accomplished during the 2015, and right now we have new one, which is the SDG, or the Sustainable Development Goals, still by the ASEAN, and it has 17 sectors or aspect that is being targeted. Number one, we have no poverty, we have no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, we have renewable energy, we have good jobs and economic growth, we have information and infrastructure, we have reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, we have responsible consumption, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace and justice, and we have partnerships for the goals. This is set to be targeted by the year 2030. Since the DOST has sought for the help of the NRCP, or the National Research Council of the Philippines, the NRCP clustered these policies into four. We have number one, social sciences, humanities, education, international policies, and governance. Second category was on physics, engineering, and industrial research, earth and space sciences, and mathematics. Third cluster is on medical, chemical, and pharmaceutical sciences. And 4 is on biological sciences, agriculture, and forestry. Let us focus on the first cluster, policies, which focuses on social sciences, humanities, education, international policies, and governance. So how did the DOST and NRCP will achieve this goal? So number 1, we have integrating ASEAN awareness in basic education without adding to the curriculum. So the ASEAN goals will be incorporated or will be articulated on different fields across subject areas in basic education, particularly elementary and high school. It also emphasize teaching in the mother tongue. As we all know, in the K-12, according to the study, it is best that children should be taught using their mother tongue because the learning will be more effective, and students tend to learn the concept easier using their mother tongue or the first language that they have learned. Next is developing school infrastructure and providing for ICT broadband. Now, the Department of Education are already addressing this issue where they tend to build more classrooms, especially for populated schools and also those schools that are in remote areas. Next is a local food security. Together with DA and our researchers, they are already maximizing food production and also help to our local farmers para mabawasan natin yung pag-import ng mga products abroad. Next cluster of policy is on physics, engineering, and industrial research, earth and space sciences, and mathematics. So here are the actions or plans of the DOST to be able to meet these goals. Number 1 is emphasizing degrees, licenses, and employment opportunities for our fellow countrymen, so that they will not go abroad just to have the opportunities to work. Okay, we create employment here in the Philippines. Next is outright grants for peer monitoring. This is to assure that all goals will be met. Next is review of RA 9184 or the government procurement policy. This should be reviewed so that the Philippine government will have the basic requirements in procuring mga government properties or materials or anything that the government will procure. Next is harnessing science and technology as an independent mover of development. This is recognizing that an improvement in science and technology is an improvement for the country. Third cluster of policies is on medical, chemical, and pharmaceutical sciences. First is to ensure compliance of drug manufacturing firms with ASEAN harmonized standards by full implementation of the FDA or the Bureau of Food and Drugs. This only means that we should not be patronizing products that are not FDA approved because that product is not tested and validated, so it may cause side effects to anyone who is using that product which is not approved by the FDA. Next is creating an education council dedicated to standardization of pharmaceutical services and care, and then we have empowering food and drug agencies to conduct evidence-based research as a pool of information. So as you will notice here, it's about research, and also the second to the last, allocating 2% of the GDP or the gross domestic product to research. Why fund research? Because as we all know right now, research really helped countries to improve their science and technology in health and in other aspects, such as what happens now during the global pandemic. It is really the research that created vaccines, that determine the cause of the virus, and many more. Next is legislating a law supporting human genome projects, which tend to understand more of the gene sequence of human beings, which will also help us understand how illnesses and mga disorders, diseases work. Therefore, we could also formulate medicines or cure for that specific illnesses. Lastly, we have biological sciences, agriculture, and forestry. This is about protecting and conserving biodiversity by full implementation of all the existing laws. This also includes regulating mining industry, also the illegal cutting of trees, and other environmental concerns. Next is the use of biosafety and standard model by the ASEAN countries. This means using mga sustainable products that will not harm our environment. Third is promoting indigenous knowledge systems and indigenous peoples conservation. Help because these people are the ones that are in with the nature. So let us help them because they will be the one also to protect our environment. Okay, so let's help them educate. Next is the formulation of common food and safety standard. That is for food security and food processing as well. And that ends our discussion on STS Lesson 2, Science, Technology, and Nation Building. For your activity, write down 3 significant learnings that you have gained from our discussion and write them in the comment section. See you again in the next video. Take care and goodbye.